Good morning, it's the 11th of March 2015 and this afternoon we're going to Hamilton for a few hours. Hello. How many days does it take for all this snow to melt?
Maybe a week of warm weather.
We got our bus tickets to Hamilton. This is a postcard I'm going to send to my uncle. You see the pictures of a helicopter flying over Quebec, where I was a couple of days ago. He'll probably get this in a week, maybe 2 weeks. We're going to try and visit Frank. He wasn't there last time. We still got about an hour before we go to catch our bus to Hamilton.
Hi Frank, it's Rod.
Awesome. Hey Frank, how have you been?
Fine.
It's great. It's
How
good.
you been?
I've been very busy. I was in Quebec last week. It was very, very, very cold.
They're very good. Could you help me today?
Snow's melting pretty fast.
Yep. 12:35.
I can even see the ground now. Yes.
Got some more?
Mm.
Give him a minute, ginger out.
There's a picture of Graham Bell.
First one.
Somebody's on there having fun. Crazy Bill.
Look at the top of the temple building with a new sonic symbol sign.
Oh, nice. Have you ever seen this place open?
It's open right now.
Right. Oh, wow. Rod's got himself another hot chocolate.
Yes.
Are you going to win something this time?
Maybe it's my lucky day.
And I got donuts. We're on the bus. Should be leaving any minute. We are in downtown Hamilton. And, okay, we've got to get off. There's something you don't see every day. Oh, we're crossing now. So we actually found a Burger King. And you're having a Whopper. I've got a double cheeseburger, no pickle. I've got 10 chicken nuggets. I've got chips. And I've got I think it's a root beer. Can't remember now. With some barbecue sauce. So this is what Burger King looks like in Canada.
I'm getting free coffee at Tim Hortons.
Yes, and the free coffee that you won. You finally won something. You see, that museum wouldn't mean anything to me. I don't follow Canadian football.
Robot.
Okay, we're going in here. I hope it's open. This is the place where we're at. Oh, someone's opening the door.
This is the family home of the McQuestons, and they were here for 116 years, from 1852 to 1968. And the McQuestons left a big impact on this part of Ontario. This is a National Historic Site. The gentleman at the top is Dr. Calvin McQueston, and he came here from the New England area in the United States. And he started out as a medical doctor, but he ended up starting the very first iron foundry in the city of Hamilton. And this became the industrial capital of Canada for a time. And he's basically the father of the industry here. And his company became eventually Massey Ferguson, which is a very well-known farm equipment company. I've had people from Australia recognize the name.
We had a big thing in Brantford.
Yes, they did, yeah. So he was a very wealthy man, and he didn't buy this house right away. He'd established his foundry, and he didn't come here with his first wife. This is Margaret Learned. She had one son that survived to adulthood. He is seen here. His name is also Calvin. He became a doctor. Margaret Learned died in childbirth. So he married again to this lady. Her name is Estimate Baldwin. Estimate had two sons with Dr. Calvin. They're seen here. The oldest one grew to be this gentleman, Isaac. And when the youngest, David, was about 4, Estimate died from consumption. And so he married again to a third wife. His third wife did not have children with Dr. Calvin. Under Elizabeth Fuller's care, the youngest died from an accident.
Okay.
She was not the most popular of his wives. And she was the only one to live here. So in 1852, before he was married to Elizabeth Fuller, he purchased this home right in the middle of town. There was a house next door that was very similar to this one. There were other houses in the neighborhood like this one. Elizabeth Fuller married Dr. Calvin because she wanted a very wealthy husband. She got that. She had expected a palace and hundreds of acres and lots of servants, and she got this relatively humble home considering his worth. So she made it her business to decorate the house in as fine a style as she could, and that meant she spent a lot of money decorating. Where we know Dr. Calvin bought the house for $3,200, she decorated the drawing room alone for $2,000. So she really went to town with his money. And she did go to town. She didn't spend a lot of money here in Hamilton. She went to New York and Boston, and she went overseas. She wrote home a few times writing, "I'm staying here until my pocketbook is lighter." So she really did make it clear what her interests were. And the two sons went through school. This one became a medical doctor, much to his father's frustration after establishing himself as a patriotic British citizen. This oldest son ended up practicing medicine in New York, and Isaac graduated from law school in Toronto at Osgoode Hall and practiced law here in Hamilton. And he brought with him this lovely lady, Mary Baker. She became Mary Baker McQuestion, a very bright woman, spoke 7 languages fluently, did lots of good work for the poor in the community through the church, and she was a very strong member of the temperance movement, so no alcohol consumption in this household, not under her watch anyway. So Dr. Calvin actually lived till he was 85 years old, and when he was failing in health, his wife was by his bedside. She had made it her business when she was here to snoop through all of his paperwork, and she'd found a copy of his will, and he had planned to divide his fortune into equal thirds between the 2 surviving sons and herself, and she thought she deserved a lot more. So she nagged him to change his will. He did that very thing. He passed away having cut her completely out of the will before he died. She was that unpleasant. And so she locked herself in the house and refused to leave. Now these two were quite bright between them. They had a lot of education, knew what their rights were. They cut off her coal supply, they cut off her gas, they cut off the grocery supplies even. And she still refused to leave until they came up with a settlement. And that finally got her out of here. She ended up in Virginia in the United States. The 2 sons divided the financial fortune equally, but Isaac and Mary moved into this house. They had already started a very fruitful marriage. They had 7 children in all. And they were living in a 3-story stone house a block away from here. They moved the contents of that house into this one, already well appointed. 2 homes amalgamated into one, and lots of children coming in here too. And lived very happily for a time. Unfortunately, Isaac invested all of his inheritance badly. He invested some of his wife's dowry badly and some of his brother's inheritance badly, fell ill, was depressed as well, started to drink, which was not acceptable to his wife, and he fell ill and died at 42, leaving them in a state of bankruptcy. And she was faced with raising these children with very little money. We see Mary's parents here, the Reverend Baker and his wife, Mary McElwain. He's an interesting character. He was in the British Navy before he became the Reverend Baker. He was in the Napoleonic Wars, the War of 1812, and he was in charge of the largest man of war on the Great Lakes. He had 1,000 sailors jumping whenever he wanted, exactly the way he wanted. He had been sent off to sea at the age of 9, so he was quite a tough man. He had 8 children from another marriage, considered them all failures. So this child had a lot of pressure put on her to succeed. So with these 2 watching over, they left their congregation in Toronto, had moved to Hamilton to keep an eye on them. And when Mary's mother died, her father moved in, didn't survive his wife for very long, and left her quite a sum of money. All of it went toward paying off the rest of the debt. So although she didn't owe money anymore, she didn't have money. And so she lived for many years with these children, pretending in the community that they were fine. They managed to save the house and everything in it through a trust situation with a good lawyer. But they pretended. They sewed their own clothes. They raised money for the poor in the community, but still struggled with their grocery bills from week to week for a long time. And the reason she didn't move was because this family had helped build the churches. They were well known in the neighborhood. They had a high status. And so they pretended that things were fine so that when they grew up, the children would have the opportunity to marry well. So the 2 oldest daughters finished high school. This is Mary, this is Hilda. They finished high school, but they didn't get married, and they didn't have children. They both lived until they were 90 years old here when they died. Mary did the organizing and cleaning, Hilda did the cooking and the gardening during the day, and at night she would resew all the clothes so that they looked like they were modern and new styles. Calvin was a writer at first. You'd think the oldest son would go out and get a great job, but writers weren't paid well. Eventually he became the Reverend Calvin, which paid even less. But up on the escarpment here, there's a sanatorium for tuberculosis patients, and he was the chaplain there for over 30 years. And I've had lots of visitors remember him. He was quite an outdoorsman. He canoed twice a week, well into his 80s here in Hamilton, and also up at Buckhorn Lake in Algonquin Park. I've had visitors remember him as a very old man hauling his canoe on shore all by himself. So quite a character in this neighborhood. Not helping out financially though. He lived till he was 92 when he died here. He was the last McQuestion here, died in 1968. So the oldest three lived the longest. Ruby was a well-trained watercolor artist. There are two of her paintings here. She did landscapes and still life work, but she didn't make money from that. Women didn't sell their artwork at that point. It would have been considered kind of crude to do so. She did what was socially acceptable. She got a job teaching at a ladies' college in Ottawa, and with the money she made from that, she put her youngest brother Thomas through law school with the help of scholarships. Now Ruby had an opportunity to marry, but she put her brother through college first, and she contracted tuberculosis from a student and died before she was 32 years old. So a bit grim, this story, but it's really quite an interesting story, and it really helps make sense of why this is here as a museum. Thomas became a huge success. I should mention that Muriel died at 21 months from childhood illness, so we only see her in this picture. Thomas graduated, became a lawyer here, was Minister of Transportation and Highways for the province, worked with the Ministry of Culture and Parks, and was quite an athlete. So he was a very busy man. He was the other one in the family that left that big imprint here. He wanted every child in Hamilton to be within walking distance of a park or a green space, so he designated huge areas of space here to parks and built and designed parks, including Gage Park, Battlefield. He bought the land that became the Royal Botanical Gardens. He bought the land that allowed McMaster University to move here from outside of Toronto, all the way down to Niagara Falls, where Oaks Garden Theatre has won a lot of awards. He started the Commonwealth Games here in Hamilton as the Empire Games. He built stadiums, indoor swimming pools, all sorts of things, but he also played different games, and he was with the Tigers before they were the Tiger Cats, so the winning football against the Toronto Argonauts is in his bedroom there. He got funding for Fort George and Fort Henry as heritage sites to get up off the ground, so as you're traveling you might see those on the map, you might have a chance to visit them. And the biggest thing he did was build bridges and roads during the Depression. So thousands of jobs were created by the work that he made, building the Rainbow Bridge, which goes to the United States, the Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia. He also built a network of highways in the north, and the first 4-lane highway in North America, which he'll travel on a lot, is the Queen Elizabeth Way. And King George and the Queen Mother were visiting at the time that he cut the ribbon to start the traffic flowing in 1939. So we've had all sorts of visitors here also say their families wouldn't have survived the Depression had it not been for the work he created. So Thomas made them much more comfortable in here. He was making a decent salary. He hired the woman I'm dressed like. Her name is Anne. She's still alive. She's 98 as of February, and she was here up till 2 years ago. She would visit, and she worked here for 22 years as their cook. He also hired a cleaning lady and a laundress, so he made his sisters' lives a lot easier. He also got an automobile for the family. So busy, he didn't get married or have children. So the last hope for offspring here is Margaret Edna, the brightest of the bunch. She won a full scholarship to Queen's University. She played great piano. She was a nervous wreck, and she stayed home where she felt secure. She did not have children. She did not get married. She ended up being committed to Homewood and Guelph. So out of all of them, as I mentioned, the oldest three lived the longest. Calvin died in 1968. This is a picture of the oldest three, Mary, Calvin, and Hilda. And they walked over to City Hall in their 80s and signed the house and everything in it over to the city of Hamilton so that it would become property of the city as a museum when they died. And they lived here tax-free until that time. And when they died, it took a team of people about 4 years to write every item down. We have sock garters and socks, and we have toothbrushes, and we have beautiful paintings and furniture, and over 8,000 letters that have been transcribed into a computer database. So really quite an amazing collection. And as you walk through, we have photographs of the different rooms in the house. Not as many upstairs as the main floor, but we know pretty much to the centimeter where everything was when they lived here. So when you're looking at their bureaus or mantelpieces, we know that what is there is what they used, the actual items. So it's pretty unique that way. And that's the spiel.
Thank you.
So it makes sense of
Yeah.
why it's here now and the significance.
A couple of questions. Where did he come from in the first place again?
Well, he started in New Hampshire, but he ended up in Boston, Massachusetts for a time.
And then he moved to Hamilton?
Yes, yeah.
And he got involved with these Massey Ferguson and stuff?
Well, no, his company to begin with was McQueston and Company, and it evolved. So the Sawyer brothers came in, then it became Sawyer Massey, then it became Massey Ferguson. So it evolved over time into Massey Ferguson.
And when did they have to kind of sell that stuff?
He sold his part of the foundry, but still had involvement with it about 5 years after moving here. So 1857, 58.
And they never had nothing to do with the steel works here? Or?
Well, it was basically the beginning of that. So after McQueston and Company came into Hamilton and started here, other industries started building up, and it ended up flourishing here basically as a steel town. But his was the first foundry here in the city. Mm-hmm. Other questions? You can ask me as we go through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, this is a very literate family. They loved reading.
Calvin's room.
The 3 paintings by the window were done by Ruby, as was the flag frame on the bedside table and the river picture just above the bedside table. And you can see his love of canoeing from his choice of artwork in here. This is the girls' room. So there were 2 bed frames and 4 girls sharing this room. All of the artwork in here was done by Ruby McQueston. So as you can see, she was quite talented. She was well trained. Eventually it was just Mary's room. Hilda was sharing the room with her until she was in her 50s and finally decided to move out into her own space. There's a dollhouse in the corner there. That's the only toy that we have out, but they saved over 200 of their favorite toys, and those go out at Christmas time on display.
Mm-hmm. With heating, I guess they had a boiler put in or something? Right now it's gas with water radiators. What was it like years ago? How did they heat the upstairs?
Initially, the only fireplace on this floor was in Mother's room, and you'll see that fireplace. They would have had little Quebec stoves in each of the rooms, not very efficient, probably pretty sooty and stinky. The first installment of radiators, these are the last installment, these Art Deco kind of heaters. But we'll see the first ones in Mother's room. Why don't we go straight across to Mother's room? The first installment was around 1912, and we know that that's when this wallpaper was installed as well. So this is true to 1912, this wallpaper. And this is the first type of radiator. The sort of ugly fat ones that are under the window there were the second installation, and over the years they got a third installation of heating as well. If you look in the mirror, you can see a bathroom that was installed for Mother in the 1920s. You know that the electricity came into the house in about 1908. pretty early on, and they would have had one of the first phone systems here too. The first international phone call in the world was made just around the corner at the Bell Building.
So you're saying that maybe international, yeah, because Brantford, it seems like they had the long
There's the
distance.
telephone capital,
Yeah,
yeah.
long distance from Paris to Brantford or something.
To the master bedroom through a door, and this was probably a nursery or sitting room at one point, and Hilda took this room over.
Extra bedroom.
That's the little sewing machine. She was refitting all of the clothes on that little sewing machine at night when there was still 20 yards of fabric in the average woman's fancy clothing here. So really quite a job. And here's Thomas's room. There's his top hat that he was wearing when he met the king and queen. The football is the winning football against the Argonauts on his bureau there. The beds actually look short in here, but I've measured them all to be 6 feet or longer. And there's an interesting sample. If you stay where you are, you can see it. This wallpaper here is reproduction wallpaper in this room, but they've left a sample of the original behind the radiator. And you can actually, if you stay just to the side there, you'll get better light. And you can follow the tail feathers right down into the original behind the plastic. So they've gone to quite a bit of trouble to make the wallpaper as true to the original as possible. The first two rooms are the rooms that visitors to Whitehorn would see. Typically you would not go upstairs. So our drawing room is meant to impress people with the fancy things in it. Elizabeth decorated this room for $2,000. We know that Dr. Calvin bought the house for $3,200. So she really did a lot of spending in here. The piano was the cost of 4 small houses in Hamilton when she purchased it. There's a hand-applied gold leaf on the walls in here. You'd be on your best behavior. Only speaking
Wow,
of
fancy.
things in here. Children would not be welcome in here unless they were practicing piano or very heavily supervised. The first room is our library here. There are just under 2,000 books here. The oldest book apparently dates back to close to 1400. It's a book written in Latin about law. All of those books have insignias in the front and the date that they were given to the people. There are popular novels, lots of reference books, 41 Bibles in different languages, children's stories, books on dog breeds, you name it. It's a very nicely varied library, and they've all been deacidified by our conservator. 8 pages at a time apparently, so it took several years. Everybody used this room too, and Elizabeth, with her need to show off the wealth of the family, would not have had a problem with this being the first room, because she actually knew how expensive books were and how impressive this many books would look to a visitor. Not done out like this, but if you come in here first,
We're downstairs now.
this used to be all whitewashed walls and a very plain space. It would have been the original kitchen in the house. All the cooking was done on the hearth there. The bread oven goes back about 4 feet. Where the armchair is here now is where the dumbwaiter would have come down into a cupboard system to take food up and down from the kitchen here to the dining room. And this is wood storage in here. But in the early 30s, a brand new kitchen was put on the back of the house. It was a state-of-the-art electric kitchen that you'll see at the end of the tour. And so this became an obsolete space. And Thomas, the one that worked for the government, decided he was going to make this his own space. You'll notice how tall the ceilings are here for a basement. So he turned this into what's known as the first rec room in Ontario. And rec rooms are very popular in North America. It's a livable space down here. Typically, a rec room is a very masculine space, so he decorated it to his own taste. His sisters did not come down here. They weren't allowed to smoke in the house. He could smoke down here without getting caught. He could offer friends a tipple of brandy without being screeched at by his Temperance sisters. And there are all sorts of mementos from his career in here too. You'll see a picture of the Rainbow Bridge, the keys to Fort George, but he also received the honorary keys to Fort Henry. The quartz crystal that you see down on the hearth is actually something that was dug up by the Toronto Transit Commission when they were excavating to see where the subway system would eventually go in Toronto, and it was turned into a lamp for Thomas as Minister of Transportation. And then these two fancy chairs here were on site at the opening of the Queen Elizabeth Way in 1939. King George sat in the armed chair, the Queen Mother sat in the high back chair, and then they were sent to Thomas as a thank you for creating the highway. The house is frozen in a particular time period, so this space allows us to have a rotating exhibit of things that we have in storage. This is 6 of the 7 full sets of china that they have.
Eggs.
So this exhibit is some of their dishware. It's called A Feast for the Eyes. The last exhibit were items from their childhood. Our very first exhibit in this space was jewelry on display with pictures and photographs of the people wearing the actual pieces that were on display. So there would have been plain walls, a plain floor. This first room is trunk storage by the 30s, but initially this is where 2 to 4 female servants would have stayed. And you can see your breath in this part of the house until January, so it's pretty cold in here usually. This room has not changed. They used to run down here for strawberry jam in the 1850s and the 1950s, and the woman I'm dressed like also ran down here for strawberry jam and pickles.
So how many servants did they have?
Well, they had 2 to 4 female servants at the beginning of the McQuestons owning this home. In the end, they had Anne, a cleaning lady, and a laundress. And we're going to head up to where they stayed, or she stayed. Anne was the only live-in servant. Let me straighten this out. There you go. So the terracotta tile here is the original back porch from 1848. And we have Art Deco glass tile in the powder room from the 1930s. And this was used as a throughway to the new part of the house. So what we have here is a state-of-the-art electric kitchen from the 1930s. And here's a picture of Anne, what she looked like when she was working here, what she looked like when she left to get married, and what she looked like at 94 when I took a photograph. And she's still alive. She turned 98 in February. And she cooked here for the McQuestons for 22 years, starting at the age of 18, and she was the only live-in servant. So they built thinking the cleaning lady would come in and stay here, but she came in from home twice a week. So Anne ended up with her own entrance,
Okay.
a very big bathroom, a lovely bedroom, and the room that was for the cleaning lady ended up Anne's sitting room. So she had quite a lot of space back here. And this was her own apartment from the age of 18 until she left her employment here. She also had a sitting room in the basement with a fireplace.
Are you visiting or are you from Hamilton?
Both visiting.
He's from Australia, I'm from Brantford.
Very cool. You're visiting then.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a music award thing happening in Canada called the Juno Awards, where it's all Canadian artists. It's like a mini Grammys.
That's Johnny Cash guitar.
Is he Canadian?
No, I don't know why.
What's his guitar doing here then?
This is a record. 45s. Oh, remember 45s. Little Canadian scene.
Music. You used to play guitar, you know.
There's Rush. Backstage back.
We're at a coffee shop called Country Style, and they're also having a promo competition thing where you can win prizes. So, and I've got an apple juice and I've got myself another donut.
Ready?
Do you want to show them what you won?
Well, I had to give it to the lady. I want a hash brown with my hot chocolate.
Yeah.
After winning a hot chocolate at Tim Hortons too today. Roll up the rim.
Which way to the bus station? This way? Alright, let's go. The time's about 5:30. Bus leaves at 6:15. We should be there 15 minutes before the bus gets here. Then we're heading back to Brantford, and tomorrow I'm heading to London. There's Queen Victoria, and it's very windy here. Which way? Okay. Well, we're here at the bus station, and I'm going to end today's video here. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Good night, and God bless from Hamilton, Ontario. Bye.